come back home.
Us for the second session of AE 311. This is our first practicum. So today I want to discuss some elements of Zoom tech and give you some basics. I know a lot of you are very familiar with Zoom already, but nonetheless, I want to cover some basics just to make sure you're getting the most out of Zoom that you can. And then we'll talk for a little bit about communication on Zoom and what some of the differences are of working with people in this virtual only environment. And then I'll propose some group roles because I want to make use of breakout rooms throughout the semester. But I know full well that breakout rooms by themselves are an awful creation, and they're just a black pit to throw you all into to sit and stare at a blank computer screen instead of participating in class. So I'm going to propose some group roles to help you make better use of that time, and make those breakout rooms actually function as a positive learning tool rather than some kind of weird Zoom flavored punishment. First off, I want to go back to tech. So just some real basic things. Your Zoom client matters. And I know some of you have to use a mobile device to connect in, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you have the choice, the desktop client is vastly superior to either the mobile client or the web-based client, the browser-based client. And the big things that neither of those clients do, the desktop client does much better, is the background noise reduction algorithms are much more robust with more options to tailor it to what you need, and then the screen sharing tools are considerably improved in the desktop client. So I want to encourage you all to go ahead and install the local desktop client and utilize that for class and for working with groups throughout the semester. Profile photo. So some of the weird disconnect is you all sit and listen to me, so you get a lot of me and I get very little of you. And I appreciate all of you on video. That actually really makes this experience on my end a lot better, to be able to see reactions to what we're discussing. You don't have to be on video all the time. But if you choose not to be on video, I would really appreciate a profile photo. So I'll show mine. You can pick something colorful, preferably something that shows your face. It helps both Dave and I a lot to be able to connect names to faces, because I get your name, but if I can't connect it to a face next year when we're back on campus and fully functioning, I'm not really going to know all of you, and that would be a real shame. So please do consider adding a profile picture to your Zoom client. So the chat. So I've already used the chat. Please do use the chat throughout the semester. That is by far the best way to ask questions. You can also raise your hand, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But the chat is a lot more useful, especially in a lecture format, because I can accumulate questions and then respond to them at a natural break in my flow. So please do use the chat. Even just comments, right? You don't have to ask specific questions, but comments, responses all help me tailor the way that I present the information. Even things like slow down or asking me to review something in more detail. The chat is by far the best option on that front. And I always have the chat up, and I'm always monitoring the chat. So I see how you all are responding to me throughout. So some basic keyboard shortcuts, and I've got a link for everyone. So it is a little different for Mac users and for Windows users. It's very different for mobile users. I'm not going to cover shortcuts for mobile or web-based users. They do exist in some capacity, at least in the browser version. But here is in the chat is a summary of some of the most common keyboard shortcuts that Zoom utilizes. So the big ones though, the big ones I want to cover is just your space bar. So when you're muted and you want to just quickly chime in on spacebar is push to talk. Right. The other solution to this for Windows users is Alt A. So that's just like a toggle for your microphone, right? So it'll mute or unmute you. So Alt A, or for Mac users, it's Command Shift A. So go ahead and try those out real quick. Nice. The other one I use a lot of is Alt V. So that's going to start and stop my video, right? So Alt Video will toggle your video on and off. Go ahead and give that a try. And then the last one I want to explicitly point out is Alt Y. So Alt Y or Option Y. So it's not Command Shift this time for Mac users. So Option Y is going to raise your hand. And most of you are already seeing that. What it does is it also sorts you to the top, both in my gallery view, but also in my participants pane, which is another thing that I always keep open when I'm utilizing Zoom to teach or to do anything really. So it'll sort you to the top and it helps me figure out who needs whatever, right? Whatever question I happen to be asking. So I'm also going to be using polls throughout the semester for multiple choice questions or whatnot in class. That's going to basically replace iClickers as a way to quickly assess where the class is at. But hand raising is really nice. Obviously, you can get it via the reactions button on the toolbar as well, but Alt Y is the shortcut. So go ahead and for those of you that have raised your hands, hit Alt Y again, and that'll toggle it back off. Within the settings, so there's a variety of things that I want to utilize here, but right now what I'm looking at, so if you go to the left bar, here's your keyboard shortcuts, right? And so you can actually reset all of these shortcuts. And in fact, I have this one set incorrectly. Oh, no, that one is good. Okay, so there's my audio. So you can change this. So say Alt A is not convenient for you for whatever reason, or it's not easy for you to remember, or if it's something that you use in another program that you don't want to confuse, you can change all of these right here. And the list is actually much longer than what's provided via the link I posted in the chat. The other thing I want to point out is the global shortcut, which I really like for working with groups, because this allows my keyboard focus to be in another program, and the keyboard shortcuts will still work in Zoom. So those are your keyboard shortcuts. Please do take a look at them. There's a lot of good tools in there that'll make your experience on Zoom a lot more seamless. So consider modifying that to suit your needs. But the big ones are, toggling your video and audio, and then Alt Y to raise your hand. So audio, let's talk about audio real quick. Headsets are almost always preferred. I noticed several of you are wearing headsets. I have one myself, which really improves my audio quite a bit. The big advantage is there, better noise cancellation. So if you're in a noisy environment, your headset is going to pick up a lot less ambient noise, including, for example, typing on your keyboard. So that's a big one. It's also importantly not dependent upon your head location. So if I look down at my notes, right, or like reach for something, y'all can still hear me, even though I'm not like talking directly into my computer. Bluetooth is really effective. Bluetooth headsets typically don't sound as natural as the UHF headset that I'm utilizing, but nonetheless, they are very good for intelligibility. So you can be clearly understood, even if there's a bit of compression in the audio. And also importantly, it lets you get up and walk away from your computer and still hear the Zoom session and still interact with the Zoom session without being leashed to your computer all day. So I don't know about you, but I spend far too much time in this little box right here. Um, so let's talk about background noise cancellation. I think this is a really important one. In order to be a good teammate, you really need to not be screaming into your microphone constantly. That, as it turns out, people really don't appreciate that. This is something I'm still trying to convince my mother of, who lives with three toy dogs that bark nonstop. So let's take a look at those settings and see what you could do to correct a house full of toy dogs barking all day long. So hit the up arrow next to your microphone, go to your audio settings. I'll go ahead and share my screen again. So here I am inside my audio settings. And the big thing I want to point out right here is suppress background noise. Now, auto is typically the correct setting. However, you know the environment that you're in. So if you regularly have barking dogs or police sirens or whatever obnoxious nonsense that comes right through into your microphones, consider moving to high background noise suppression. Alternatively, if you're in like a quiet corner of your basement, then maybe low is going to work. Probably want to head make that work correctly. But you can get that tailored to your particular environment. Now, one caveat was setting that to high background noise suppression. When you have it set to high, that means that Zoom is going to necessarily assume that new sounds are bad sounds, right? And so that means your vocal pickup is going to be a little slower. So when I crank my background suppression up to compensate for a noisy environment, which happens, I remember it ironically. So I try to, like, when I'm speaking, I try to eliminate those like connector words. Like, I'm really bad about so, and that's my like my guilty pleasure in speaking, I guess, right now. Is another one that we all use, right? When I set my background noise suppression to high, I actually intentionally proceed what I'm saying with because that helps the vocal pickup. Otherwise, when you have high background noise suppression, a lot of times Zoom will cut the first word of your sentence, making it kind of difficult for people to understand what you're trying to say. So just something to consider with background noise suppression and how to get your audio set up to suit whatever environment you happen to be in. Let your teammates know, let me know, for the record, when audio is bad. You all probably already know that Zoom doesn't give you direct feedback on your audio, right? I can't hear myself right now, but you all can. And so if there's a problem with my audio, oftentimes I'm the last person to know, right? So just say something to your teammates, because we all find ourselves in that situation from time to time where we don't realize that, that my Cheetos are crinkling directly into my microphone and it's totally ruining the group conversation because all you can hear is me eating Cheetos, right? Or whatever. That's I think, yeah, my notes here. The funniest experience I ever had with that was I run big virtual dance events, and the first big dance event I ran on Zoom, I got into the first block of music in my set, and there's a song that I knew really well, and I sang that whole song directly into my microphone. I was having a great time. I had no idea. I looked at the chat afterwards, and everyone's like, "Should we tell him?" No, let's let him run with that. And I'm like, and here's the worst part: I was not trying to sing well. I was just belting it out because I thought I was alone in my living room singing to the song. So please say something. We usually don't know. Okay, so bad connection. So bad connection happens to all of us for a variety of reasons. Hopefully, you don't have to deal with it too much because it can be really frustrating. Um, the first step is always when your connection is bad, rather than drop out of the meeting, turn off your video. So, video takes roughly an order of magnitude more upload bandwidth than your audio does. So what that means is if you're limited in bandwidth, the first solution is to turn off your video, and then usually that'll clean up your audio because it's your connection has to be pretty terrible or totally failing for it to not be able to transmit audio effectively. So consider that, when your teammates are like, "Hey, we can't understand you at all," rather than leaving, turn your video off and you can at least talk to them. Now, if you know that you have consistently bad audio, and this happens, or sorry, consistently bad connection, um, a really solid option is to dial in using your phone. And that means your 4G connection carries the audio signal. So even when your video is glitching and dropping frames, your audio remains stable. And you can actually dial into a meeting and join from your computer and then merge the two once you've joined from both methods. So that way you can get stable audio via your phone and still have whatever remaining bandwidth is there to handle your video. So hopefully most of you don't have to deal with that. I just wanted to introduce that solution in case that's something you need. So video. So let's all go quickly to the video settings. So up arrow next to the camera in the bottom left corner. The bottom option is video settings. And let's take a look at some of our video options quickly. I'm going to share the screen again. Okay, so video options here. One big one I want to point out is this one right here, touch up my appearance. So you see this checkbox right there. I really like this. This is essentially virtual foundation, if you will. So it's really nice because it gives me a lot of confidence in my appearance, even if I have to go to an early meeting and I literally just rolled out of bed. So I'm a big fan of this, and you can kind of crank it up and you can see if I'm too high, that's obvious, right? So let's bring it back down to a more reasonable level because that's all my friends know I'm not that pretty. So touch up your appearance. Consider using it. Like I said, the main role it serves is it helps you be more confident in your appearance so that you're more willing to go on video, even if you aren't really ready for the day and cleaned up and looking your best. Okay, share stop. Okay, so virtual backgrounds. So virtual backgrounds, one caveat here, you need to have reasonably solid bandwidth. So if your connection is unstable, stay away from virtual backgrounds. They are not going to do you any favors. That said, if you have a good connection, I'm a huge fan. There's a lot of reasons to use them. Primarily, again, this comes back to confidence in your appearance, right? If you're using virtual backgrounds, you can hide all the clutter or the empty beer bottles from over the weekend. I don't care. I'm not judging. You can hide them quickly using a virtual background. And so if you don't feel confident in your environment, for the same reason you might use the touch up appearance slider, consider using virtual backgrounds so that you can be more confident when you go on video. Some tips on that. And actually there's another link. Let me grab that link. There's also audio help that I linked in the practicum. There we go. So virtual background tips. So there's a lot of ways to do them wrong and a handful of ways to do them right. So there is the link there in the chat. So the basics though, here's the really simple stuff that you want to get right when you're playing with your virtual background. It's going to work best with a background behind you that is uniform and high contrast. And so what I mean by that And let me kill my virtual background real quick. Sorry, this takes a moment because Zoom's a little slow on the pickup because I don't have dedicated graphics, unfortunately. Okay, so there we go. So you can see behind me, I have a green screen. It's not necessary to have a green screen, but you do want to consider what high contrast might mean for you. So here, I've got a slip cover on my chair too. So let me pull that off. So I've got a high back black chair. That's not so good for my dark brown beard, right? Because on the virtual backgrounds, that makes my whole face wiggle. It's terrible. And then the back of the chair pops in and out of existence. So what you want to avoid, um, yeah, what you want to avoid is having your background the same color as your shirt or your facial hair or your face. Like if you have a light pink wall behind you, that's going to make some problems with the virtual backgrounds. So let me, I'm actually going to take my green screen out of the way here. Roll it up a little better than that. Okay, so here's another real problem: light sources. So lighting matters. And you can see when I move the green screen out of the way, these light sources directly behind me glare my face out and make my video a total mess. Y'all, well, at least some of you are in principle going into lighting design. So consider the lighting design of your space surrounding your laptop. What you really want is your light sources to primarily be either above or preferably behind. I know that's a little tricky a lot of times, depending on how your space is set up. Um, but above and behind your camera, wherever your camera is located, is preferred. And so let me show that. Fortunately, I've got setting right here on my phone. If I can log into Hue, there we go. So all I did here was I took the lights out behind my head. And in fact, I didn't kill them entirely. That strip is still on a little bit, but you really want to avoid direct view of any light sources behind your head. Now, another major criticism of this setup right now, and you can see why that green screen is important for my Zoom setup, even if I'm not using a virtual background, it's that giant window that's on screen. So windows are in fact light sources, and in the middle of the day, like right now, where there's a clear blue sky for the first time in months, um, windows are a very bright light source. Daylight is far brighter than your interior light sources, and that's going to glare you out as well. So you want to try to avoid pointing your camera directly in. So, cool. So that's just some of my basic ideas on tech. And for the record, all of these notes are in the practicum outline. That's the first link in the class materials under the virtual team building practicum. So, if you want to check back in with any of this later, that's available for you. Let's talk about a little about Zoom communication. So there's some big differences on Zoom, and virtual background too. Just some extra cool like that. Uh, so some of the big differences in Zoom, the number one thing is asynchronous audio, and actually you can see my chair misbehaving behind me. That needs the slip cover. So I think the biggest thing is asynchronous audio. And so you can see right now I have a gold box surrounding me, right? So that means that I dominate the audio. So my audio is boosted and everyone else's audio is not, right? So Dave, are you with me right now?
Yes, I am.
So could you do me a favor and just talk over me right now? So I'm just going to keep talking nonsense and you just try to take over
Okay.
the audio from me. so
Yep,
that
yep,
they
yep,
can
yep, yep,
see
yep,
the
yep.
way it
He
bounces
just
back and
never
forth.
stops
Yeah,
talking. He always talking.
I know, endlessly. That's what my wife says too. Uh, so, okay. So the thing I was wanting to point out here, and you see, I have a gold bar right now. So when you have a gold bar, it means that your audio is less boosted than the gold box, right? So essentially, what this gets us is 1.5 speakers, if you will. So the gold box, which is me right now, is going to dominate the audio. If you have a gold bar, it means that people can hear you, but not as loud. And if you don't have the gold bar, the gold box, chances are no one's able to hear you at all. So something to keep in mind when you're discussing things in a group is you when you don't have that audio focus because of the asynchronous nature, which honestly is a great thing in most situations. But because of the asynchronous audio, if you don't have that gold box, no one's listening to you. And it's not because they hate you. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is. Hopefully it's not. Um, but it's rather because Zoom hates you. So just something to be aware of in the way you're coming across. It's also a good check to see if you're sending audio, right? Because a lot of times with a headset, it might not be connected correctly, and so that's my last mile check. Am I pushing audio into Zoom? Because if I don't get the audio focus ever, chances are I'm not. Pause length. Okay, this is a big one. Um, so there's lag in Zoom, as you all know. It's not super long. It'll be longer if you're on different continents, for example, right? So some of our students are not in the U.S. in 311, and so that pause length is going to be quite a bit longer for them. So when you're speaking, consider that and consider increased pauses and it's important to be aware of because otherwise you can end up talking over people a lot. So that pause needs to be longer if you're going to hand off the conversational lead. It's much longer on Zoom than it is in person. And I say that as a person with a very short pause length. And so it can be very difficult to get a word in edgewise with me on Zoom. So I try to increase my pauses when I'm really finishing a thought. Positivity bias. Okay, this is a big one. This is a big one, and we discussed we kind of brought it up briefly. Um, don't forget your social niceties. Don't forget to say hello to people when they come in. You know, the chat is a great way to do that. Um, there's just waving is really nice. You know, when someone joins the feed and there's only like 4 or 5 of you in there, and those are especially important because we're missing them right now, right? And we're a lot of us some of us are socially stunted to begin with, and quarantine is not helping this process at all for us. So don't forget your social niceties. It really means a lot to a lot of people right now. Check-ins are a great way to start group meetings. Just having everyone, just say how they're doing, how they're feeling, not like a 20-minute diatribe on everything that's going on in their life, but, just a few minutes to say, man, I'm really tired. I worked until 3 a.m. last night on that 311 project because Dave and Jay are ball busters, right? Just having those check-ins matters. Um, Also remember that you're looking at me, you're looking at everyone right now in a little two-dimensional box, right? So there's a lot fewer social cues, a lot fewer facial cues, and tone cues that are stripped away in this environment. And what that means is that you're more likely to be misinterpreted. And so I try to always check myself and have a strong positivity bias in everything that I say because neutral or neutral negative statements can be perceived very negatively by people on Zoom simply because they don't have any context to place that statement within, right? And when you're missing those cues, you're just more likely to be interpreted as strongly negative, and negative interactions of any kind seem so much worse because when that meeting ends, a lot of times your group mates are going out of that meeting to an empty room. They're alone in an empty room, and those negative words are going to echo in their head. And so I just want to point that out, so that we're aware of this. And so we should be taking extra steps to make sure that we have positive interactions with our friends, with our teammates, with our classmates, because those words can echo so severely. And I say this being guilty of the exact same problem myself, because I'm still not talking to a very close friend of mine. We had a disagreement over the way we were running a show on New Year's, and honestly, it's a completely silly, pointless argument because we just ran out of time to finish what we were working on. So it's neither of our fault. Nonetheless, I haven't spoken to her since New Year's, and that sucks. And it's because the last thing I said to her was negative, and I have no doubt those negative words are ringing around in her head and have been for 3 weeks now. So please, keep the positivity bias in mind. It matters right now. Um, Sign language. Okay, so I have a good friend, Antonietta Alfano, who has been teaching sign language classes for Zoom. And so the big advantage here is, so I'm dominating the audio channel right now. And so that means that the rest of you can't really talk very easily. Or if you do, you're going to be interjecting into what I'm saying. But what you still have is a visual only communication channel that's still very present. And this room's pretty big, so it's a little wonkier. But in your breakout rooms, ASL is really useful. So some of the basics, and so if you all could go on video to practice some very basic ASL with me, that would be great. You don't have to go on video, obviously, but it helps to see yourself when you practice this. So yes and no, I think, are the most important utility signs, simply because you can signal that you agree, yes, or disagree, no, without actually saying that, right? So everyone try that with me. So make a fist, and you're just going to knock on an imaginary door, right? Here's your yes, right? Now for no, I've got two fingers and my thumb, right? And then I'm just going to bring my fingers together. So that's no. And actually, that's me saying no repeatedly, right? That's, I joke with Antonietta that when we finally see each other in person, everything I do in ASL is going to be like screaming. Because in Zoom, I tend to repeat my signs just to make them extra clear. So, okay. So just for fun, are you all AE students? Yes or no? Sweet. Are you all ducks? Getting some yeses. Do you all hope to get an A this semester? Cool. So yes and no are really nice tools to use in the group format, simply so you can confirm, yes, I agree, or no, I disagree, without having that back and forth with the asynchronous audio. Thank you is another one. Again, social niceties, so important in Zoom right now. So thank you. I'm going to take my hand, and so it's just a flat hand, and I'm going to touch my chin, and I just bring it out like 6 inches or so. So thank you. And you can reinforce that by mouthing the words, thank you. So go ahead and try that with me. Thank you. Now, important thing here, that's fuck you. Don't be doing that to your teammates. We're trying to be nice here, right? So thank you starts at your chin and comes out. Fuck you starts under your chin. So don't tell your teammates to fuck off all the time. That's not great manners. You want it on the chin. Thank you. Yeah. Applause. Applause is really nice one. Because applause in Zoom on audio is god awful. I don't know if you've ever been down that rabbit hole, but I don't recommend it. So deaf applause. So you take your hands like this, right? And then you just shake them. Yeah. There, applause. Or a round of applause. Cool. Oh, and I think my favorite one, this is the one I actually use the most, is actually it's your turn, my turn. And so again, talking about asynchronous audio, when you talk over someone, you know what the solution is not? To say to them, no, 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 you go, because you're still taking over the audio at that point. So you haven't fixed the problem at all by telling them to talk. You're just going back into that same cycle of like, me, no, you, not, yeah. So sign language. So your turn, my turn. So make an L. Now turn your palm towards you. So you've got your thumb pointing up. And by the way, it's always dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, do this right-handed. If you're left-handed, do this left-handed. Um, so you've got the L point with the thumb pointing up. So your turn is simply tilting that towards the other person. And then my turn is tilting it towards you. So your turn, my turn. So if I'm trying to hand off the conversational lead, I say your turn, my turn, Katie's turn. My wife is off camera making faces at me. Anyways, so yeah, so it's if you're signaling turn, it's just you whoever you're pushing the sign towards, it's their turn, right? So my turn, your turn, Katie's turn. Unless you have a virtual background, in which case it's no one's turn. Cool. So that's some basic ASL, just to help restore that, an additional avenue of communication, because we have this visual only communication avenue, but a lot of us just simply don't use it for much. Group roles. And actually, this is something, again, this is in the notes. So this is starting on page 3. I would like to propose some standard group roles for use in breakout rooms to help make those breakout rooms a little more useful to you. And the way that I like to break it down is 3 key roles. There's the session lead, the parliamentarian, and the screen sharer. Okay, so, and I cannot say this clearly enough. The most important role is not the session lead, it is the parliamentarian. So, and let's dig into what I mean by that. So, first off, you want to shift these roles regularly, right? You don't want any one person dominating one role or another. That's not a great way to have a healthy group dynamic. So please do shift these roles regularly, with the possible exception of screen share, because the best screen share is going to have the nicest computer. And some people just don't have the horsepower to effectively screen share more complex programs like CAD or Photoshop. So the parliamentarian has 3 jobs. And again, these are all in the notes. I just want to introduce these concepts, and you can go back to the notes that I provided in the practicum for use in the future. So the parliamentarian has three roles. Number 1, it's keep track of the team. So what I mean by that is take notes in a shared document, initiate and record votes if votes are needed for whatever you're doing, send out reminders like a GCal entry for upcoming meetings. So that's the obvious job of a parliamentarian, right? The second role I would propose for that is keeping the team on track. And there's some nuance to this, because keeping the team on track, I would argue, does not and should not mean shutting down all sidebars as soon as they happen. In fact, we're socially starved for the most part, right? So some purely social interaction in your group meetings is a really positive thing right now. It can make a lot of us much happier and healthier, actually, just having some time to bullshit really means a lot to me personally. So I would advocate that the parliamentarian should not try to shut down these rabbit trails, but rather look for an opening and steer it back in, right? So don't shut it down immediately. Let it run and then bring it back into work when there's a good opening to do so. Um, and then finally, keep the team together. So the parliamentarian should ask for those check-ins I mentioned earlier at the beginning of your meeting. Um, make sure like really that positivity bias, again, I cannot stress that enough. Positivity bias really, really helps right now. Um, and then also you should be paying attention to your teammates and make sure to encourage contributions from everyone. It's very easy to withdraw on Zoom and stop participating, right? And so I would propose another important job of the parliamentarian is to pay attention to your teammates. And if someone hasn't contributed in a while or responded in a while, check in with them, right? And if you think they're feeling bad, then maybe instead of calling them out in front of the whole group, direct message them in the chat. Just ask them like, "Hey, how are you doing?" Right? And that can be a really effective way to bring people back into the conversation. That's Nicholas, you're killing me right now. That's all right. Right, rabbit trails. So parliamentarian is an extremely important role because you keep the team on track and importantly keep the team together. The session lead is exactly what you think it is. So the session lead's job is to define your group goals, break down the problem into achievable steps, and then request contributions. And again, I want to add some nuance to this because I think this is really important. A good team leader doesn't demand work from people. A good team leader asks the teammates if they can accomplish a certain task, right? Like, can you do this, right? Is this something you want to do? Is this something you can contribute to the team, right? Demanding work from people is a good way for them to do nothing until the next group meeting. But your team lead does need to ask for contributions from people. So you should do that. Just pay attention to the way you ask, right? Don't command, don't demand, don't order, request. And then finally, creating action items at the end of the meeting. And this is a big one for the team lead. Clearly stating and defining action items is important because what that does is it sets the path forward for your team so that things actually happen after the end of the meeting. If you don't define action items, then oftentimes your team gets back together in 3 days or a week and no one has done a thing because no one had a thing to do, right? So define those action items so that your team can take steps on their own to move the project forward. Then the last role, screen sharer. So obviously, the screen sharer on the team needs a pretty rock solid computer. Reliable internet is crucial to that, right? Because you typically are pushing your bandwidth up even higher. So reliable internet's important. Locally installed software. So the VDI lab is a great way to access things like CAD and Revit. However, it's basically a non-starter with Zoom. You're not going to be able to function effectively on Zoom and screen share VDI lab unless you've got like a T5 directly into the university backbone or something. It's just not going to work. So locally installed software matters for the screen share. For my part of the class in the second half of the semester, AGI 32 will be the main software you're using, and you can all install that locally. We have an agreement with the publisher to provide a temporary educational license for AE 311 and our other classes here. So, having a computer with the horsepower to run that locally is important. Dual screens. Oh man, dual screens really matter. I know a lot of you don't have access to that right now, but for the screen share, at least, dual screens is helpful because then you can see your team on one side and your work on the other. And a graphics card for those of you that are gamers, a dedicated GPU works wonders on trying to run hardcore software like CAD and Revit in alongside Zoom. So if you have someone on your team that has a computer like that, then chances are they're probably a pretty good choice to stick with for screen sharing. So your job as a screen share is to synthesize the input from your team members. So and and I have this in the notes, and again, this is important. Acknowledge inputs, right? I know that a lot of times you can be in a flow and like you're building the model in Revit, and everyone's just like shouting things at you, and it's really easy for you to just ignore people. At least acknowledge their contributions. Even if you can't like implement it directly in front of them right away, at least say like, yes, yes, that's a good idea, or I'll take a note on that or whatever. Acknowledge their contributions, because completely ignoring your team members is just a great way for them to stop contributing to the team. So yeah, so your job is to synthesize input from team members, make sure to respond to contributions as they come in, uh, quickly mock up solutions, and then take notes on the shortcuts you took so you can clean things up later, when you don't have to worry about sharing your screen. And then finally, of course, share your files. As a group, you should have a team share drive somewhere, whether it's Google Drive or Box or OneDrive, and then make sure those files are available to your teammates afterwards, and clearly label them. Oh my god, file names super important. Don't just give it a string of letters and numbers, otherwise that becomes another garbage file that no one looks at because they don't know what it is. So clearly label it, date it even, so that you can find your work afterwards, because you're sharing, and so you want your teammates to be able to quickly identify those files, and they aren't going to know whatever weird naming convention you're using.